So we'll continue with an introduction to polity in this video as well. In the previous video, we have already seen how there is an equitable sharing of power in the Indian parliamentary system of government. That is into three organs: the legislative, the executive and the judiciary. The legislature is the body that legislates. That is, legislation is the process of making of law. And together with the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and the president, the legislature is made up. We looked at the executive, which looks after the daily functioning of the government, the president, vice president, the council of ministers, the prime minister, who is the head of the government, and the attorney general of India together makes up the executive. We saw that everything about the government and the type of government is written in a document called the Constitution of India. So now we will be looking at the Constitution. The best way to learn is by asking questions. We can begin by asking, what is the Constitution? What is its function? What role does it perform for a society? How does the Constitution relate to our daily existence? So once we begin asking these questions, we will begin to find the answer to what a constitution is. The various peoples that constitute a country, especially one like India, which is easily the most diverse, vibrant democracy in the world, need to get along. We have people who profess to all the major religions of the world in India, in addition to a host of tribal populations with their own renditions of religions and gods. We have numerous languages, people with different professions and different abilities, different ideologies and different tastes. This being the case, there is obviously going to be differences of opinion on major questions like how much property should one be allowed to own? Should it be compulsory that every child be sent to school, or should parents be allowed to decide? How much should this group spend on its safety and security, or should it build more parks instead? Should the group be allowed to discriminate against some of its members, etc.? These are the questions that need to be answered when a country is being built. Hence, some issues needs to be sorted out beforehand, and some minimal coordination is necessary for the society to function smoothly and coherently. Everyday legislation is a different issue. Everyday implementation of the legislation is a different issue. For that, we have the parliament, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. We have already seen this. But in the beginning, when we are setting up a society, a country, we have to have some basic rules, a basic skeletal framework, so that there is minimal coordination, so that the society can function smoothly and coherently. To achieve this, the Constitution has been framed, which is nothing but a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination amongst its members. This is the first function of the Constitution, to allow for minimal coordination amongst the members of a society. The next, as we discussed before, is with regards to distribution of powers between the executive, legislature and judiciary. It is the function of the Constitution to specify who has the power to make the necessary decisions in a society. I repeat, it is the function of the Constitution to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society. The third function of the Constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens. This is the third function. The third function of the Constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens. Such a government is called as a limited government because it has limited powers and limited functions. These limits are fundamental in the sense that government may never trespass them. This is how individual rights were born, and these are also known as fundamental rights. We will look at fundamental rights as part of the function of the Constitution. The fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. Although not always justiciable, some principles are enshrined in the Constitution that talk about the direction we should as a society go towards. These principles are called as the directive principles of state policy. Just before this, we saw that we had fundamental rights or individual rights, which are justiciable. The state cannot trespass these rights. However, not all rights can be made justiciable. For example, we would like everybody to have a very good education in the society, but we cannot make this a justiciable right because there are so many problems. For example, there is not enough revenue to guarantee everybody a place in the IITs or the IIMs. Similarly, we want everybody to have basic housing or universal housing. Although we want this, we cannot make it a justiciable right because the state does not have enough money to build 1,000,000 houses. So such principles or such wishes are actually enshrined in the Constitution in a non-justiciable part. This is called as directive principles of state policy. These principles are what our state should head towards. Over time, these principles should also become justiciable. This is what the Constituent Assembly thought. In addition to the above functions, the Constitution, through its norms, also expresses the fundamental identity of a people, the political identity and the moral identity. The political identity is formed by agreeing on the way through which basic norms in which a people are to be governed is finalized. That is how the people are to be governed. This is the basis for political identity. On the other hand, individual aspirations, goals and freedoms are pursued within the constitutional framework. The Constitution sets authoritative constraints upon what one may or may not do, thus defining the fundamental values that we may not trespass and in the process bestowing us with a moral identity. So as far as moral identity goes, individual aspirations, goals and freedoms are pursued within the constitutional framework. So even moral identity or moral values are defined within the constitutional framework. So the Constitution sets authoritative constraints upon what one may or may not do. So even the moral identity is defined by the framework of the Constitution. As we discussed the structure of the government, we will also discuss the structure of the Constitution to get our basics right. The Constitution was adopted in two phases. Some provisions were adopted on the 26th of November of 1949 and the rest on 26th January of 1950, which we celebrate now as the Republic Day. So the adoption of the Constitution is celebrated as the Republic Day. The Constitution as adopted on 26th January of 1950 contained 22 parts, 365 articles and 8 schedules. This is what the original Constitution had. It had 22 parts, 365 articles and 8 schedules. Each part has articles. Articles contains provisions. Schedules form sort of an appendix as you would find in the books. As time has passed by, the various amendments have been made to the Constitution to suit the needs of the day and the necessities of the society and to reflect the dreams and goals of the people. This ability to amend the Constitution shows that the Constitution is a living, dynamic rule book rather than a set of rigid rules handed down by God, as is often the case with religious scriptures. So if we look at the Western world, they look at king as a representative as God. That is how it has been in Europe. So the Constitution is a living document that reflects the will of the people and identity and wishes of the people. So the Constitution is not like a religious scripture that has been handed out by God, that is rigid. So the Constitutional is a living document that is a dynamic book and it continues to represent the interests and wishes of the people at all times. However, it is not easy to amend the Constitution and there needs to be consensus established between political parties, the two houses of parliament and with the states that make up the union. Hence, the makers of the Constitution envisioned a structure where the Constitution was neither too rigid, as it is the case with the United States of America, nor is it too flexible. So this is one of the outstanding features of our Constitution, where it is neither too rigid nor too flexible. In the US, amending the Constitution is very, very hard. In India, it is neither too difficult nor too easy. So the Constitution can be amended with the consent between political parties, the two houses of parliament, and with the states that make up the union as well. Today, after several amendments, the Constitution has 25 parts, 465 articles and 12 schedules. Even as we say this, the number of articles are increasing. The entire Constitution can be found on the web as well as on the app, that is the Rama IAS app. Take some time and learn the terms of the parts and run through the articles and schedules. We will discuss them in great details over the next 100 videos. Next, we will take up the topic of the Constituent Assembly. As addressed before, the Constitution was drafted by some people. Who were these people? What was their qualification to draft a constitution? Why were they chosen to represent the people to frame the constitution? These are some of the questions that we need to answer as we try to understand this assembly of people who drafted the constitution. This assembly of people is termed as the Constituent Assembly. So in the next video, we will be looking at the Constituent Assembly. This concludes the video. Please watch the video multiple times so that the concepts are clear. Thank you.